Good afternoon. Is that working? I'll pull it a bit closer. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to come along and provide a bit more context in relation to our 24-25 Statement of Intent. The document was submitted in its draft form at the end of February, so I will take it as read, but I will step through a couple of key points. I first want to acknowledge our board members that are here. We've got Logan, Erin and Tony, and also taking off their councillor hats and putting on their VT board hats. We also have Stacey and the esteemed Mr. Booth at the other end. And I also want to acknowledge our chair, Tony Howie, who couldn't make it today due to some business commitments. So, VT, as your economic or as the district's economic and tourism agency, we're all about enabling a vibrant and thriving community by cultivating the economic potential of our district. That's basically our live and die by. Just make sure I slip the right. So just to give you an overview, our SOI this year has been presented in a new format that we hope makes it a bit more palatable from a reading perspective than the pretty bland one previously. It was important that we evidence to you our alignment to TDC's vision and values, and also the letter of expectation received. I'll talk a bit more on these as I step through, but this is the executive summary, if you want to put it that way. Towards 2050 underpins everything we will be doing, very much an aspirational pathway and foundation. Focus in on our core economic development and promotional objectives. Reworked our KPIs. We took on board some of the discussions that we'd had both at this forum but also individually with the Mayor and CE around tweaking those KPIs, encompassing a few numerically measurable ones. Pleased I got that out. And monitoring indicators. Small operational funding increase, sort of alongside some new funding to support and develop the cruise sector. Things have moved a wee bit since we presented put our draft in. I can talk about that. And then obviously full disclosure and inclusion of all the supplementary information that we need in our SOI in relation to the Local Government Act as your CCO. So this is, I'll dive deeper into some of the other key parts, but very important, as I said, for us to evidence the alignment through to the Council's own vision and core values. But it also gave us an opportunity to talk a bit around the key role that we have as that facilitate, enable and grow. And a key to that is fostering those relationships, both locally, regionally, nationally, and with mana whenua. And it also, to fill in a page or a couple of pages, it was a good opportunity for us to evidence to you some of the wider work that we do and the collaboration that we do through our community at a variety of levels. Focusing in on towards 2050, as positioned, I think just on a year ago, we believe there's a strong opportunity for us to lead and help facilitate an aspirational vision towards 2050. Focuses in on population growth, improved productivity, higher paid and more jobs, increased GDP and enviable quality of life. 5 key planks that underpin that. Importantly, this document or this work will not replicate anything that's done. It needs to align full into the LTP. It needs to encompass work that's already done or underway or planned around energy strategies, water strategies, our need for better infrastructure, etc. as well. I'm not going to go through that line by line. I'll take that as read. The nature and scope of activities. So we've got our overarching long-term focus, and then we've pulled that back into those core 5 things that make our boat go faster at Venture Timaru, which is those 3-year operational objectives around existing and new business, the workforce, promoting the district and attracting investment. The prioritised activities, again, that is not all we're going to do in the 24-25 year, but they are some of the key ones that we believe need a bit of prominence in our SOI, and there's a lot of other work in underneath. So I know there was, we've put in there bit of a stake in the ground around the Caroline Bay plan for the future. I know it came up earlier in the council meeting around the encompassing of that Caroline Bay master plan in the master plan that's being completed by ISMIS, I think is correct. We believe that's a massively important piece of work. That's our biggest jewel in the crown, we believe, from a attraction, both workforce but also our visitor attraction, and our board and the wider VT team are putting their hand up to actually, if we're not going to develop it, then we're putting our hand up to own it and make sure that the improvements in that are implemented under guidance of council. So, such is the importance of that asset, we believe. I can come back to some of these, but I think if I go through and then we can come back and answer queries if that's okay.
Just on that, Nigel, have you had any input to the master plan or been questioned around it?
Which one?
The latest one.
Caroline Bay,
yeah.
A wee bit some months ago, and I sit on the steering committee with Councillor Jackson. Sorry, I know you as OJ. Sorry, but yeah, again, that's us putting the flag up the pole around the importance of having a master plan for Caroline Bay area. The key performance indicators, we've broken those down. We believe it's still important for us. There are a number of, I'll come down to the monitoring indicators. Previously, we had our monitoring indicators, successes indicators, etc. It's really important for us as the Economic Development Agency to monitor and track those key performance or those monitoring indicators around GDP, the unemployment, housing affordability, consumer and visitor spend. We don't directly influence them, but they're important planks of what we do. So they're important that we will continue to do that. We undertake to do that. And the key performance indicators, that's us really tweaking, I suppose, providing a bit more numerical or objective measurements in there. We took on board the feedback that we received from you all. And then the last bit underneath is just really around our Towards 2050 plan, important that we identify the steps that will be undertaken over the course of the next year or two to put the meat on the bones and ensure alignment. But most importantly, the engagement with our wider community so they can both buy in, but most importantly provide input so that we are aligned to how great this district can be come 2050 and beyond. Our budget for 24-25, we've broken that down a wee bit. You'll note there we haven't, I think CPI at the moment's north of 4. We've sort of a small operational funding increase across our economic development, visitor attraction, haven't requested it for events. And the Regional Apprenticeship Initiative, My Next Move, and the Tech Step events, we've broken down what that external project funding is. And again, the Regional Apprenticeship Initiative, if you remember, that's the one that brought north of 4 million into the district over the course of the last 3.5 years, and that's coming to an end in, it's now fully allocated and it will be dispersed over the course of the next year. We've also included in there up to, and it's important, I use the term up to 60,000 to support and develop the cruise sector. We had a good catch up with the, Tony Howie and myself had a good catch up with the Mayor and the CE, and we put through a paper in relation to that. That was in February when the volume of and the mix of cruise ships was anticipated to be slightly different than what it is now. So I would anticipate that funding in the next year wouldn't be, definitely not more than 30,000, in fact maybe even a bit less. But you'll appreciate with the cruise sector it's a bit of a moving beast given the size and shape and how and when the cruise ships call. So that is, Primeport have committed to funding their the expenses associated with getting the ship in, docked up, health and safety, etc., and getting the passengers safely off the wharf. And our expenses, as per the paper that we put to council late last year, relates to basically the resourcing and the collateral, the promotion, the capacity building of our sector, the operators that provide the experiences in that as well. And that's it from me. I've jumped through that a wee bit, but again, I anticipate you've had those 2 to 3 months with our SOI, so take it as read. But more than happy to field any questions at all.
Not directly related to the presentation, Antarctic New Zealand, have they said anything? Because it appears they're moving away from the modules to a regular build from reporting in the paper. So I presume that won't be in Timaru. Yeah.
My understanding prior to the start of this month, there were 4 options going to the board, and all of them included Timaru to some extent. I would suggest that we don't believe what we read in the paper until it actually comes out from the people concerned, which is Antarctic NZ and MFAT. I anticipate, Councillor, that will happen within the next week or so. They were making the final decision on what that project will look like, size, shape, form and everything, based off those 4 recommendations at the board meeting this month. We keep our fingers crossed.
Leading question, if it doesn't go ahead, do we get our $500,000 back? What was the...
Wrong Nigel to direct that one to, Councillor.
Just around the cruise business, we've just seen the council spent some money on traffic management. Were you aware of, is that something that's...
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't hear the...
We just seen a report which said that the council had spent 25,000 on traffic management for the... So is that within our budget, or is that they've done that separately?
No, that's separate. Ours is purely operational in relation to those cruise passengers and the RTO responsibilities.
Yeah, okay. And what's it looking like for the cruise season coming up?
At this stage, there are 8 ships booked. Previously, we had Resilient Lady coming 3 times, which was the last ship that came in. So that was the Virgin Voyages one. Because of the operational costs of getting cruise ships down here, a lot of that down to the South Pacific, a lot of the cruise lines are questioning it. So for Resilient Lady, they've opted next season to keep it in the Caribbean. They also don't want to sail through the Red Sea at the moment, and that's probably got worse in the last week. And they, so at this stage, 8 booked. It's a mix of size, half and half, smaller vessels to the larger vessels carrying 1,200 to about 2,000 passengers. So the season afterwards is something like, at this point, there are already bookings in now, 10 to 12, something like that. So it's about that, but Primeport are actively schmoozing the cruise lines to try to get them in. We know that we do have a good reputation. They like us, they like the ease of access to the CBD, they like the friendly locals, because people here still want to know the cruise passengers and they say hello when they walk down the street, you know, they like that. So we are a regional port that is a little bit of a different taste from, you know, many of the other ones, and so it seems like they're happy to come as long as it fits with our itineraries.
I've got some just feedback on your statement of intentions, quite a lot actually, but I'll start and see how we go. With your partnerships and collaborations that you describe on whatever page that is this what you think is ideal, or is this what you think is happening, or is this what you aspire to happen? Because of description of partnership with Tangata Whenua, and I'm confused. Is that happening now? Is it what you think good looks like, or what is it?
Yeah, we have a developing relationship with Mana Whenua. We have an operational one, myself and the GM there, along with his 2 colleagues, Tawera and John. Our chair is has reached out and is due to establish a board-to-board relationship with mana whenua as well. And in addition to that, we also have direct operational relationships up into iwi, but we manage them appropriately in relation to the interaction we have with ara whenua,
So it
and to a
doesn't-
lesser extent Waio and Maraki.
It doesn't sound like an authentic partnership, which is how you've described it.
You'd have to ask ara whenua. I believe it's an authentic partnership.
In your next page, you've talked about business connection groups. How do some of that on the face of it, to me, sits with the Chamber. I've always thought you guys get business to Timaru and the Chamber support them when they're here, but how do you make sure that you're not duplicating work? Because I just think as South Canterbury, we all need to work together efficiently and make sure that, groups aren't doing the same stuff.
As highlighted, I think, in our, when I presented this previously, we operate at a macro level, which is more strategic. We operate as an economic development. The Chamber is a member organisation representing 500 to 600 members of businesses of the 3,500 in the wider South Canterbury, operate at an operational level around training and a bit of advocacy in that as well. It's important that we interact with both individual businesses when we're looking to help and assist them, but their business connection groups are effectively that. They're industry groups that we meet with on a quarterly basis, 6 to 8 or 8 to 12 week basis, primarily focused in on things like workforce challenges. That was the foundation of them originally stepping up, but also things around collaboration, sharing of best practice, etc. Two very distinct operations of business development and economic development. We engage with the Chamber. We would like it to be a more mutually replicated relationship, and we continue to work with the Chamber on that.
My next point came up at an earlier meeting, and you talk about major events funding there, and I've got kind of two questions. How do you balance the new with the existing? Like at what point do you go to an existing, you actually need to survive on your own, we need to get, how do you balance that?
For all of the events that come through for funding, we have a scoring system where we're looking at things like economic benefit for the region and things, but there's also a wellbeing component as well. So within the scoring system, a lot of these factors are taken into account, and when somebody comes and they may have been coming a number of years, I guess sometimes it would be easy to suggest that you could say, okay, you should stand alone now, but we also see that there's benefit in continuing to support these groups to show them that they have the support of the Economic and Tourism Agency and the Timaru District Council as well. So we see that as an important role for us, because otherwise guys like the Team Who Event for Hire who brought Illuminate to town, which is an awesome event, arguably they might not come. They might look at some other council who's going to support them in the same way. So we work really hard to try to support as many people as we can through that events funding, and it is a developing process.
That came up before is why is council doing some small event funding stuff, and why are you doing some big stuff, and why isn't it all just a place to be more efficient and easier for people applying for events funding to navigate?
I would suggest the reason that we as the Economic Development Agency and the RTO are doing the medium to large ones is the impact that they have, both from an economic perspective, the community, the smaller wellbeing events are important, but the ability for us to resource up and manage a significant amount or increased significant amount of applications is definitely not there. And I think the distinction needs to be made. The council does as an enabler in a community, the key community plank, and I think it's important that that distinction is made around those medium to large events. And just to take Di's point, it's a very good question, Councillor Pye, around those new versus existing. Our core existing key medium and large events like the Rock and Hops of this world and the South Island Masters Games. They are continually evolving and provide significant benefit to the community across all those planks that I mentioned. And we continually review how our colleagues around the country are looking at how they do. Just as these events are evolving, we look to evolve as well around how we support these events and that as well. So those smaller events that you talk to, we play a role in terms of the support that we can provide them as some of that capability building and promotional and that sort of thing, just like we do for the, the likes of the markets and things like that.
And so with your policy review, Councillor Scott was saying that you've actually changed it to 5K or something anyway, or is that coming through, is that correct? As far as the events that you're...
Yeah, I think it's more around, I think there was a conversation you and I had about a year ago.
No, Councillor Scott said the last meeting that your policy review...
Yeah.
Yeah, because we had 3 events that we would have thought would have just set, that came through to donations and loans that wouldn't have been just the last iteration that would have...
I think it's important that there is that clarity there, and we've called it a major events fund, medium to large. We've just got to make sure that it's clear to our community, those organisers and those event managers, that where they can go, and we have a very clear promotion in relation to our round in relation to that.
So one of the concerns, and it's been some years that that the fund sat there now, but one of the concerns I remember Richard having back in the day was around TDC's brand, and it does feel like TDC's brand, because it's meant to be all dual, from my interpretation, dual recognition, but on some of the events that are supported, I can't see TDC to find myself, so the problem that we have is, if we're all working, our CCOs in general, working, in parallel, stronger together, actually, the brand that we need to push is actually, I would argue, is actually TDC, less so VT.
We're being more vigilant in chasing that to them
okay.
This time around. In the last year or so, we're working harder, because sometimes these organisations have gone ahead and printed posters and things without getting us to check first. And now it's a requirement in the contract that we implemented last season to say that all posters and collateral like that, we have to cite to approve, as we would do like a sponsorship kind of arrangement.
Yeah, no, totally. Because I just look at the amount of money overall, and this is, through VT and donations and loans. We've got bike trail incentives and some other things. It totals about 500-600 grand, but our brand recognition is pretty minimal relative. So we need our brand to be a big part of that, because we get a lot of criticism for lots of stuff, and that some of that might be rightly so, but actually it balances out the brand. So to your point, I mean, I think you've summed that up.
Yeah, and we're definitely working on it, and also it's comparative to other sponsorship that they have too. Is that if they get $10,000 and they get 25 from someone else, then obviously it's going to be a little bit smaller.
No.
But
Yeah, get all that.
The other thing too, Your Worship, in relation to that too, is that every time that we are engaged with by the media to talk about the Major Events Fund, every single time we are saying that we are administering it on behalf of the Timaru District Council. When event organisers are approached by the media, despite we can do everything that we can.
I get that. Yeah.
So, but in terms of all the collateral and all of that, there's always room for improvement, and we're continuing making it very clear to these people that receive these funds that it is Timaru District Council money.
Yeah, look, and I think there's probably some stuff that we can do ourselves to better push that out there. Question just in regard to KPIs, and this is not targeted at all, it's just a general conversation. I'm keen to hear from board members as well. So, you throw KPIs in there, as an example, I'm just going to use this as an example, but minimum of 6 new residential developments progressed. And my question is not specifically to that, but what sits in here that is going to happen anyway versus what are the targeted things? And this is always the problem with ED and money spent on tourism, is it's the measurability, isn't it? But what are the things that are going to happen anyway versus the things that we can focus on? And then my question is, are we balancing that right on where we're putting our energy? So should we be putting more energy on the things that we can move the dial on versus some of the things that actually are probably just reporting? Just want a general conversation, really. Yeah. And anyone jump in. We don't get these opportunities very often, so keen to have an open floor sort of discussion.
I think the key to any KPIs is evidencing the value that VT has provided in relation to what that KPI is measuring, and that's the important thing from us. So you talk of things that would happen already, you know, the extent to which VT may or may not have been involved in the past, as those things as they progress. That's for us via our KPIs to evidence, and it comes into that value add and the extent of our involvement as that facilitator and enabler, sitting alongside that developer and helping engage with you know, with council or whoever else to make sure that developments progress. So
this is probably extending my question, but then at what point is something a success? And actually, is it, you know, core ED, and this is a board discussion, it's not for me to decide, but what's core ED versus actually, is there someone else out there that can, you know, can look after that service, and you come back to, you know, economic development? Just discussion. I don't have the answers, that's why I'm asking you guys. Because we want our best bang for buck, and where our ED's, you know, really performing at the best, then we can, you know, turn the dial for the district, I think, so.
Something that we have discussed recently around the board table about moving that dial, and that's where we feel that towards 2050 is one of the biggest things that we can do for the district. And in some respects, much of the work that's done is intangible, but what would happen if we weren't doing it? You know, like, some of it's measurable, some of it's not. And we're going to be making sure that we set time aside to make sure that we are moving forward with the 2050. And yes, some of those other things will happen as business as usual, but we still need to keep an eye on them.
I think that's the other reason why throughout the strategy session we separated the KPIs and the monitoring indicators, because we highlighted that, you know, yes, things are being picked up for now, but quite often the ball's dropped and we need to sort of poke something to get it sort of reignited and flare it up again. So as a board, we're sort of spending a fair bit of time trying to understand what does a KPI look like that is tangible, and then what are these monitoring indicators that we just need to keep. Things like housing, for example, we can't directly impact that, but we can keep a watching brief on it and try to sort of encourage the parties that need to work together on it.
I'd like to add, I think that the discussions have moved from the board table from when we've done something, we let it go and move on. And to your point, when the business is in town, it's over to the chamber then. And that's we go and deal with that. We can't keep monitoring and hanging on to things. Well, we've got it done, we've achieved that, we need to move on. Because things are changing, the whole landscape is changing all the time, in that sense. So I think if there's to be a change in how we're approaching those things.
That's the same with our relationship even with TDHL. You know, we introduce the business if it's appropriate to them, and then we've got to move on. We just let them take over that relationship, and I think, yeah, we're just learning how to manage that better at the moment.
So this has kind of been one of my pet things lately, is I think as a region, we need a master plan. You know, it's not council's long-term plan, it's not your statement of intentions or TDHL, but as a whole region, like, what have we got where we can win? You know, the port, the airport, the bay, and, you know, sports fields and stuff like that. And then how do we leverage off that? And to that point, we put in our statement of expectations that we expected you to do a whole of district strategy that pulls together all those things, and I don't see that anywhere in the statement of intentions.
that's what our Toward 2050 is. And Yeah, it is, and it is also, the reason we didn't put it in there is because the CE and I have already we've kicked off that stakeholder infrastructure, water, health, education, those key foundations of a district. That piece of work will be kicked off shortly. So yeah, towards 2050, our view is that we need to be aspirational. That first piece of work that we did was purely a pretty brief desktop to give us the understanding. It said if we carry on doing the same things, we're going to get the same results. So this is the aspirational bit around doing more, doing better, that sort of thing, off those foundations of better jobs, more and better paid jobs, increased productivity, etc. So the meat on the bones is exactly what you're asking for, councillor, around so there's the two things. We've got to focus in on something that's not a year out or 5 years out. It's actually a long-term vision or aspiration for the district. And I use that term, and it's probably not the right way to put it, but it now is about putting the meat on the bones over this next while, which is what the key KPI is in.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm keen to see, and how do we involve all of community in this? Because, as you go around the community, like I was out at Pleasant Point the other day, and they were talking about their cricket fields or something, and how they're one of a kind, and, there's not many around because there's so many fields. So how do we leverage off that? And then what do we need to leverage off that? Do we need more accommodation? Well, if we do, who's going to build it? Is it private? All that kind of stuff is what I'm looking for.
If I can share, at our last board meeting, we had quite a vocal discussion, I think we could say, around this 2050. And correct me if I'm wrong, fellow board members, but we did say that within 12 months we want a plan for that. And that's not a plan of the detail of exactly what you're going to do with all those fields. But if we can't excite the community into doing something different, then that's going to impact your long-term plans. It's going to impact the future of everybody. So we talk very strongly about a sell, I suppose, to our community. We have to get out there. The community have to understand. If we do what we're currently doing now, we are going backwards. We're not even standing still. So unless we can excite the community into what is possible, and yes, there's some big figures in there, but if we don't have an aspiration to go there, then we don't need to worry about these other, what you could call minor projects and building a master plan. If people believe that it's possible, then you've got the traction to do a lot more, to get other people to put energy in, because it's not only VT and it's not only the council that can make this fly, it's the whole community. But unless they see that vision and they hear those numbers, which I would suggest that most of our population haven't read that report, and perhaps that's a communication issue that we haven't really shared with the community, what it means if we don't do something different, then you won't see your grandkids in here. You won't have your grandkids living around you. They'll come and visit you at Christmas, but that's it. They're going to be living and working somewhere else. We've got to do something different. We have to be more diverse than we are, but we have to get the whole community to buy into that. Once we've got that movement, then I think we can make more progress around, and we have suggested that we need money to do this, and we may need the community to start putting in, helping money to develop the plan. And that's not through their rates, it may be different ways of contributing to get this sorted. Because it's certainly, if we can't get their buy-in, we are wasting our time here, because the future's not good.
Councillor Pai, that strategic vision needs to be set at a level that it feeds into a long-term plan. And so, and have the right stakeholders at the table, and that is definitely a discussion that we've had. And now we just need to shape it so we can get started on it. I think the board is definitely connected on that stakeholder engagement who needs to be at the table at that high strategic level to support the council in its long-term plan and vision. So yes, that is...
Even just our long-term plan, I'm talking about, there's always talk, Timaru needs a conference centre. I'm not saying it does or it doesn't, but if that is what we want, then how do we get it? If private sector can't deliver it, do TDHL deliver it? Or do we try and get VT to go and get somebody else to come to the community and deliver it? That's the kind of thing I'm thinking about, is what do we want here and what do we need, and then who's going to deliver it? And it may not be anyone that's in this room. It could be private enterprise.
When we come back to the discussion we had at the last board meeting, while it needs to be macro, this has to be shared with every service organisation in town. It's got to be shared with those clubs that you talk about, because if they can't see the benefits, then they're going to argue against any development of, for example, a new accommodation or a conference centre, unless they actually see and understand what's needed to make it grow. And if they buy into that, then they're going to have an easier acceptance of either VT or TDHL or council then trying to get private partnerships or public partnerships together. They'll be much more accommodating of that. But until they actually see how the situation is, it's all just nice ideas. So macro, yes, as Stacey has said, but we also have to get all those service clubs, those organisations who are our community to understand and share in this vision. Because if we can't get them to buy in, we won't need a conference centre because they're not going to help fund it.
There was sorry, Councillor.
I agree with you, Tony, absolutely. My problem is every provincial town's having the same conversation. How are we going to be different? I mean, I'm with Michelle and I get what Stacey said, and it's good. But to say we wanted a conference centre, I mean, recently a private company tried to put a motel, hotel, whatever you want to call it, motor lodge up, and the numbers didn't stack up. So they're not going to stack up for anyone else. So how do we break that down? Do we, say to TDHL, you buy the land, that's your social cost for the year, and we go out and do X, Y. I mean, they basically gave it to them. So I'm not saying it's totally easy, but we're going to have this conversation in 10 years' time unless we sit around and actually brainstorm and come up with some real targets. And again, I'm not saying it is a conference centre, but if that's what it is, and Alan donates his land on top of the Bay Hill to us, we'll have the best looking one. Thompson's put the lift to the ground. I can get everyone involved here. But you know what I mean? How do we move forward? Because I've only been on the council 5 years, but I heard this conversation 5 years ago, and we're still paddling. And that's not a criticism of everyone. I'm just thinking maybe Michelle's right, and we need to get some other smart people to join the smart people in this room and actually find a way forward.
Which is the key stakeholder that was in our request from council in our letter of expectation, which we're getting underway. So that's that foundation, the smart brains, as you want to call it, across those key enablers, whether it's people, water, energy, health, education, infrastructure. One of the other things, just while I remember, there was a comment made around a lack of commentary in our SOI around governance. There was a request in there around good practice, etc. We do actually have a board charter which is attached to our constitution, which covers all that off already anyway. That's here in council somewhere, so that was just covering off our board charter, not on our website, no.
So I'll just come back again into that view that we can get more smart people in the room and we could still be here in 10 years' time doing it again. And I just take the example of, if you take Seaplay, that wasn't smart people in the room, it was a community that did that, and they did it. And perhaps the community were actually excited about what they could see, and they went and did it, they made it happen. And I'm saying what our job here with our 20 by 75, 50 by 70, 75 by 50, is to get the community excited. If we can't get them, then they won't support going forward. And unless we change the demographics in this region, in our district, we are in serious trouble, very serious trouble, economically, financially, for everyone who exists here today. But unless we can get them to see what's possible, then we can't. And I'm happy to be marked against that as a board. What did you do with your strategy with this? I'm happy to be marked against that. But we can't do this on our own. And it's not a VT, it's not a TDHL, it's not a council, it's a whole district buying into where we want to go together. We can put the ideas up then, but if they're all on the bus with us, we'll get there.
Yeah, I agree entirely. Yeah, that's the model. If you look at the, where things have gone well over the last few years, I mean, people used to be, before I came in, I was probably one of those people. I'd say, well, why isn't council doing that? Why isn't council doing this? And, you know, if you look at Sea Play, if you look at the stadium, and if you look at, you know, community and business and what they can deliver, you know, my theory has now changed that actually council needs to get out of the way. And the more we get out of the way, actually, the more and people take us for granted in the everyday, then actually the more business can get on and prosper and community can prosper. So I agree, it's community-led, but it's how you inspire that, isn't it? So that's the interesting challenge, but you inspire by being stronger together. So we all need to pick up on this and buy it and buy, you know, and sell it probably to the community effectively. So, yeah, looking forward to the next steps. We don't get the opportunity probably to say thank you. There's been some great things happen over the last wee while. I know we can always, you know, focus on the negative, but you know, there's a lot of really positive things. From put my business hat on for a moment, you know, some of the cruise support in there has just been phenomenal. Geez, that last big boat with the Aussies on it, they just boozed all day. It was fantastic. So, but you know, there's a lot. There's a lot of good stuff that we hear, you know, across tourism and ED that's from community. So don't get the opportunity to pass that on. So thank you. But I think the key thing for us with our CCOs, just in generally, and I know that there's, you know, you've got to be able to be out there to challenge us and what have you. But actually, the closer we are, and the more that we're aligned, and we need to come together more regularly rather than, you know, once a year on an SOI. You know, whatever forum that looks like, you know, we're going to deliver more for community.
And we'd welcome that. First of all, thanks for the comments, and it actually works two ways. So that, you know, it's a support we have direct in a forum like this, but also it's all the indirect relationship through, you know, driven through your two elected members that sit on our board, but also the interaction that we have at various levels into council as well. So the support we get is great and valued by us as well. And look, we'd welcome that. We have a good, strong interactive relationship with Fraser and his team. Fraser and his team at TDHL. And, you know, we're three prongs of the spear, if we can put it that way. And most definitely, you know, at the end of the day, council is our mothership, and the more interaction and that clear, or that clarity around the priorities and who's best to implement and etc. Is hugely important, because we're all actually here. It's not about any of us. It's about the people that choose to live here and choose to come and visit and ultimately stay and establish a business and a family. So thank you.